Hello, everyone. I hope you're warm and cozy wherever you are. We were just talking about the weather. And it's always a great time to actually talk about our topic tonight, because sometimes when it's really cold out, we need to figure out how, in addition to wrapping up, we can actually create some internal heat. So I think that'll be a good part of our conversation. Just by way of introduction, I'm Ashley Koff. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm CEO of the Better Nutrition Program. I do these interviews very selfishly because I love learning from my colleagues. So I'm lucky that I get to ask the questions, but we're also here for you, and we will have the opportunity to ask your questions throughout. I may save them and kind of bundle them so that we can get the expert thoughts and get some of my questions answered as we go through. But, feel free to ask any questions. If they're of a more personal nature, I'm also going to ask our expert to jump in and answer those either there, or we can direct you over to, and actually Gauri has shared her email address, because as you noted in the information, she does something, a 15-minute clarity call, which I absolutely love, and I encourage all of you to take advantage of, because when we start with clarity on where we're going, that's going to be a great way to figure out how to get there better. So let us know where you're joining us from. I'm in Columbus, Ohio tonight, and without further ado, I want to introduce my expert tonight from the Better Nutrition Program Expert Interviews. Gauri Janarkar, is it Gauri or Gauri? Gauri?
It's Gauri.
Gauri, okay. I have a friend from Singapore who I pronounce it Gauri, and all of a sudden you'll see me blushing. I'm like, I should have asked her how she pronounces it. All right, Gauri. So I apologize, but lovely to meet you. I'm thrilled to explore your background and really to have you unpack for us something that just a practice that is has such a long-standing history globally in terms of from healing and health and wellness. But before we do all of that, and hello, Darlene, thank you so much for joining us from Philadelphia. Before we dive into that, I thought what we would do, I always like to start off with sort of my lexicon discussion, because one of the things I've learned, I'm sure you have this experience, I remember having somebody come in and tell me they were a vegetarian, and I was like waiting through the food journal to try to find the vegetables, right? And I was like, all right, and that's not a judgment point, it's just we all use phrases differently. So by way of introduction, you are the founder of Ayur Nutrition. You are, which is an integrative and holistic wellness practice, also a registered dietitian and Ayurvedic practitioner, certified diabetes educator, and licensed massage therapist. So I'm going to start with, I'd love for you to define and sort of when you call your practice an integrative and holistic wellness practice, what do those terms mean, and what does it reflect in your training and your approach?
Sure. So actually, my practice, which is Ayur Nutrition, when I say it's integrative, is because being a registered dietitian, definitely I integrate nutrition into the daily diet and things for my patients. But besides that, I have a background in Ayurvedic medicine. I actually was trained as an Ayurvedic physician in India, worked as an Ayurvedic physician before I came to the United States. And that background in Ayurveda is something that I always wanted to integrate into nutrition, because in Ayurveda, 70 to 80% depends upon a diet, and the diet is more for what is called your dosha type or your body type. So it becomes more individualized and more personalized at that point of time. So I wanted to always bring in the traditional knowledge, integrate it with nutrition, make it more a wholesome approach when I'm talking to my patients about how we can integrate, some of the spices in our diet. What are some of the Ayurvedic herbs and things we can actually include into our diet as well. When it comes to modern nutrition, how we can get both of the East and the West approach to that. And that's how I started with the Ayur Nutrition practice.
I love it. So let's go backwards. You're from India, from Mumbai, and you grew up there. And I'd love to understand what your perspective on Ayurveda was growing up there and how it's practiced in India.
Okay. So growing up in India, grew up with all, the different spices in our foods daily. And I remember that, we cooked our meals fresh. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, everything was made fresh. We included all different spices into our meals. We also included all different whole grains, different vegetables, different fruits. And what was interesting also is that we actually followed diet based on different seasons. Because in Ayurveda, we believe that, your dosha, the physiology changes with the different seasons, and we definitely need to change our diet based on the particular season. And that's something, have also followed here in the United States, looking at the different seasons. Again, what are some of the fruits and vegetables, some of the whole grains we can include. And just to give you an example, also think about it. For example, in summer, if you think about the fruits we get, it's something which is higher in the water element or the water content, because that helps us to quench our thirst. Similarly, in winter, we get more nuts because that actually helps us increase our internal heat. So that really is something that Ayurveda talks about is, diet according to your body type, something which is more personalized and again, which is more individualized. And that's how I grew up with, including all these different things into a diet with Ayurveda as a background.
I think that has that really resonates with me, especially as somebody who sort of in the last 5 years has gone from living in Los Angeles full time to Washington D.C./Ohio, and I find myself craving things and feeling like I just need different tools. And the immediate one is like, oh, how do I keep my skin, in the winter, to not feel so dry, etc. But I notice actually even just with my breathing, and so I love what you're talking about, which is, so many of us, especially in this country, will travel or spend significant amounts of time in a climate that is different, than maybe where we grew up. So that makes a ton of sense. So let's start off with, when we look at health and wellness, and I mentioned that you're offering this clarity call, which I'm so grateful for. Gauri also has a book, so if you're really interested in diving into this, I definitely encourage you to get that primer, and we included it and has that beautiful logo. So that is a great way for you to go through it yourself. Ayurveda is actually becoming kind of trendy, and I say that because I just recently was sent over something where somebody said, take your dosha quiz, right? And it was like, and it was only 4 questions. And I was like, wait a second, you're figuring out like what my body needs with like these 4 questions. And of course, at the end, it was to like sell me a supplement, or that kind of a thing. So, I believe, I've been able to collaborate in the past with, Chinese medicine practitioners and Ayurvedic practitioners. So the actual experience of being diagnosed is totally different. So I thought that we would go through how you actually, when you meet a patient, and I'd love to also understand how you're diagnosing, but also when a patient comes to you, what would be helpful if they brought with them.
Okay. So one of the things when the client comes to me is basically we definitely go into their history really in detail. We could talk about diet in detail to figure out, first of all, when it comes to the dosha type, it's just not in the quiz, but we definitely have a questionnaire we have our clients go through. We also look at, again, what are some of the things that the person, when it comes to history, lifestyle, schedule, what he's been eating, stress levels, some of the symptoms that this person also portrays. So when you look at the person's dosha type, it actually goes a little more in detail with the actual, what you call the characteristics that are described a little more in detail in the Ayurvedic text, and correlating those along with the person's diet, the person's schedule, his lifestyle, if he has any signs or symptoms at this point of time. Based on all these things, we actually come to think about, okay, what could be this person's dosha type? And again, what can we help with when it comes to specifically the diet part for this person?
Yeah. I have to apologize for 1 second. I could blame Mercury retrograde. I think I'm going to blame my typing skills. I have a Y after your name in the banner, and it should be an I. I think I have it spelled correctly everywhere else, but I always just like to acknowledge that I'm totally in the better not perfect mode on that part. So in terms of that assessment, I thought that we would sort of talk a little bit about a couple of cornerstone pieces. So of course, there are trendy diets and things like that today.
Correct.
On the one hand, I think we have a lot of people saying like kind of battling between keto and paleo and plant-based. But how does Ayurveda either play in with those? Like, could you be keto with an Ayurvedic practice, or is it that they're looking at the practice is looking at things in a different way, and you recommend a different diet?
Correct. So when you think about the Ayurveda part, of the Ayurvedic nutrition part, it focuses more on a balance. What we're trying to achieve is a balance, both with diet along with the Ayurvedic lifestyle. And with Ayurvedic lifestyle, a lot of times includes a lot of different Ayurvedic therapies included, and Ayurvedic massage therapy, which is called Abhyanga, is one of the key parts along with that. And depending upon, again, as I said, what the different symptoms and things are, different Ayurvedic therapies are included along with the Ayurvedic diet at that point of time.
And you actually did, I thought this was fascinating. I was looking at your bio. So you actually did research on skin cancer and looking at turmeric. Probably at the time that you were doing it, curcumin, like people were just like, what is this herb? But now we're seeing this root actually in so many different places. And some people, maybe there's a sprinkling of turmeric in a latte that has a ton of sugar in it. And, so there's a lot of differences. Help me understand the therapeutic use of the root and how to know if you're getting a good source, and really also then take it through to melanoma. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your findings.
Sure. So since you asked about turmeric, now turmeric, if you look at turmeric, it's actually a tuber. And the best way to actually consume turmeric is basically if you have those dried tubers, you actually ground it and you get the pure turmeric. That's the best to have. Now turmeric works really good with black pepper as well, to bring in the synergy and bring in the potency of turmeric. And one of the ways to really include turmeric in our diet is the best way is to add it to our meals as a spice. Okay. Now the study I had done on turmeric, basically the curcumin, and basically it's the melanoma. It was an animal study that we had looked at, and we had looked at basically two categories. Groups of animals. One was fed a turmeric diet, the other one was your regular diet, and we looked at the levels of the melanoma, and we looked at certain factors, whether the turmeric diet actually helped with reducing those factors for melanoma risk. And actually we did find that it actually helped reducing some of those risk factors for melanoma as well, and that was it was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, because I know that there are all these things that turmeric is talked about for, but you're actually talking about not once somebody has the melanoma, but the actual risk. And yes, it was done in animal studies, but enough to carry over on that part. And so, I think a lot of us either have parents who maybe have melanomas, or we're concerned about, I had really bad sun behavior when I was a child, and so I'm worried about that part. And so that's one of those things that we can do. So what would be a couple of different ways from a nutrition, from a diet standpoint, that you might incorporate in turmeric?
So turmeric, as I said, we can include it in a spice. For example, if you were making a soup, you're sauteing your vegetables. If you like a more wholesome dish, this is something called as khichdi, where you can actually make it from either rice or quinoa, and you can combine it with different vegetables and lentils especially, and that can be a wholesome dish, which includes not only turmeric, but all different other spices can be included as well.
So what would you say, one of the other, I mentioned keto before, a number of the diets today in the U.S. are presented as what we call very low carbohydrate or low carbohydrate diet. When we look globally, there are so many diets that are actually based in plant-based carbohydrates. How does Ayurveda sort of have that play of carbohydrates? And when you talk about the balance, we obviously know carbohydrates are used for energy. So what is the balance? How is that balance achieved in the Ayurvedic nutrition practice?
So in the Ayurveda, one of the things when we look at, we include whole grains, we include fruits, we include vegetables, we include spices, we include nuts as well. So we include these different whole grains for a particular dosha type. So just to give you an example, a person who is more vata, I would say who has more of the wind element than the vata, who's more skinny or who has more of the bony body structure, could be in a vata body type. And for him, wheat something with rice, something with ghee or butter is something that would be recommended for this person, because it helps pacify what we call the vata, or balance the vata. So depending upon what the dosha type is, so the person can actually consume a balanced meal, which will have different whole grains, different vegetables, different fruits, different nuts, different spices, again, which is more personalized for the dosha type. So if you look at the Ayurvedic diet, it really doesn't exclude any particular food group.
So, and I asked that question diving a little bit more into another area of expertise for you. You're a certified diabetes educator. And so,
Right.
one of the things with that is it's often like just avoid carbohydrates or follow a high protein diet, or, so what are some of the things either for, maybe we'll take somebody who might be pre-diabetic and we're trying to help them, or somebody who's diabetic. So we'll take those separately. So let's start with the pre-diabetic. What are some of the things that could be nutrition interventions, iron nutrition interventions, to help them bring their normalize their hemoglobin A1C?
So with pre-diabetes being such an important stage, one of the things I definitely emphasize with a lot of patients is that, weight loss is a key when it comes to pre-diabetes. So what we also do is, one of the things we definitely focus is on the modern nutrition part as well. We'll definitely look at, the caloric level for this person, but we also help distribute carbohydrates throughout the day. So what essentially the part is that we are getting the carbohydrates throughout the day. It's just we're not having everything at one time. So it becomes more easier than on the body to actually break it down, and we also focus on more complex carbohydrates. So whole grains and things is something we always we focus on. So with pre-diabetes, weight management becomes an important tool to bring down the risk for for a person who has history of pre-diabetes in going into diabetes, is focusing on weight management. But along with the weight management, one of the things I've also started focusing a lot actually is on stress management. Because that's something I find that is one of the key or the underlying principles a lot of times with a lot of the patients is just, I'm trying to understand, if their current eating habits, how we can change, what we can change step by step. At the same time, what can we do to actually help with the stress management, working in synergy with this patient as well.
So what might be, because I think when people hear weight management, they're like, yeah, no kidding. Like, it's right up on the list. Like, I don't know, I want to lose weight and I want my blood sugar to be lower, but I find myself back here each year with, the A1C creeping up a little bit. So what might be 2 or 3 things that you would, and they don't have to be nutrition related because you're talking about that holistic, that you might, it's hard without knowing a patient, but just, some examples of things that you find to be particularly effective for those patients?
So one thing definitely I focus on is making sure that they are, for a lot of people, is making sure that they're having their meals on time. A lot of time, there's a lot of time gap in between meals, and then what happens is then people tend to overeat at the next meal. So how we can distribute those meals more evenly throughout the day, including more complex carbohydrates, including more fiber into the diet as well. At the same time, increasing their physical activity. And it can be as simple as starting a 10-minute walk for them to feel how are they feeling better. And then increasing slowly, depending upon whatever their tolerance level is. So integrating their activity along with, managing their meals, making them better, and at the same time, stress management. Some of the things I've actually started including in my practice is, for people is, along who are coming for weight management or for diabetes, is getting in the Ayurvedic Abhyanga or the Ayurvedic Abhyanga massage, and we actually have them test the blood sugars before and after, and we see a significant drop, at least 30 to 40 points after that massage therapy as well.
How does Ayurveda approach or integrate some practices of things like dietary supplements? So, for example, I would think that vitamin D as one of those nutrients that we think about, so important for hormonal balance and blood sugar metabolism, but also really isn't found in most whole foods. So, how do you focus on bringing that piece in for your patients?
So, for example, let's say it's something like an example can be amlaki or amla. It is a fruit, and amla has shown to be has the highest content of vitamin C. Per se. So that can be a great source actually to have adding vitamin C naturally into our meals or into our diet, along with, let's say, the person is having some citrus fruits and things as well. So that, and again, having spices, adding spices into their diet, example turmeric and things, ginger, to increase again their appetite. For a person, let's say, wants to increase more of the anti-inflammatory benefits, then adding more turmeric, more cumin, more coriander and things into the spices easily could be an effective way as well.
And what about for vitamin D, like people are getting vitamin D, but they might think that they're getting it from their milk, or that might be their source, but now it's like, hey, we're trying to create that better balance. Is that something you'd approach supplementally, or would you look at food sources?
So actually, for that, one of the things I'm actually recommending, being a licensed massage therapist as well, is have them do a daily abhyanga, daily self-massage with either organic coconut oil or organic sesame seed oil, depending upon what their dosha type is. And actually, if they can, sit in the sun for 10 to 15 minutes early morning sun, which actually helps increasing the vitamin D naturally.
Wow, I love that. Okay, great. So let's think about somebody where you're offering. It's so generous. Gauri is offering a clarity call, a 15-minute clarity call. The email is in the box here. The information on the session, whether you're watching it now or later, she's offering it. It seems like why not, especially if you have any questions from sort of where is your health today. So who do you think is the right person to connect with you that you really feel like Ayur Nutrition is? Hey, this is the person that I think we can really make great headway towards helping them get their better health.
So I would say any person who really wants to increase their energy levels, better their nutrition more naturally, adding in more of some of the Ayurvedic therapies and things to reduce their stress management, reduce their stress. That is an ideal person. So I can't define saying, this is person A versus person B. But ideally, it can be any person who really wants to improve their nutrition, wants to also decrease their stress levels at the same time. And again, through both Ayurveda as well as the nutrition approach.
I think that's so important. And it's kind of like an intention of the question to get the answer that you presented, which is this really is about the person who's invested or is investing and isn't seeing results. On that part. So one of the things when we talk about Ayurveda, and you mentioned balance, I find that so challenging personally and also for others where so many of the things that we want to do are stimulating or want to enjoy. Maybe so. How do you sort of look? Is it through your day and say? So, for example, I really love high intensity, those, interval training workouts. I don't love them while I'm doing them, but I love the feeling. Sometimes I love them while I'm doing it, but I really love, that experience. But I do find afterwards that, I have to be really dialed in on what I'm doing afterwards and also even the next day. Otherwise, I find myself kind of in a cycle of craving other stimulants, or said differently, just really exhausted. And as a result, kind of making choices from that. So how can you, so when I'm thinking through that is, what are some of the tips as you're working with a patient for how they can sort of assess where they are in the moment and make choices that help them to balance better throughout the day, rather than saying like, hey, this is what I want you to do from a balance standpoint?
Yes, so really good question, Ashley. So one of the important things is a lot of times I find patients struggling is meal planning, organizing meals. So one of the things I always suggest to a lot of my patients is, on the weekend, take time to actually look at your schedule for the next week and think about, can you actually plan your meals ahead of time? It may be as simple as making your, let's say, soup, or it may be as simple as making, let's say, something like khichdi ahead of time, portioning them out, freezing it, and putting them in their freezer. And let's say you have some salad with you, bagging that salad. So all you have to do for the whole week then is grabbing, let's say, that salad, grabbing a soup with your, maybe it's a whole wheat or whole grain bread, or it can be the khichdi. That means things are already made for you. You don't have to rush. You don't have to go into the fast food line. You don't have to go into the and look at eating out. Now, whatever you can cook at home, that's the best thing we can do for our body, best thing to get the best nutrition, because we are in better control with the quality of the ingredients, the number of ingredients, the amount of sugar, salt, and things we are adding. So again, prepping ahead of time, organizing ahead of time is something I definitely will recommend. And the second thing is, I will tell them, that a lot of my patients is, we experience stress on a daily basis. We need to combat stress on a daily basis. So think about, maybe it's something like as simple as, it may be meditation in the morning, or it may be as simple as before we go to bed, just doing something like yoga nidra, which is one of the yogic meditation, which is a deep-seated meditation as well. So can we do something to actually prep our bodies better for the stress? So meal planning, prepping, and stress management. Again, I keep emphasizing on stress management a lot, because I see that a lot in that practice as well.
Well, and so I'm going to add the stress layer on top of it that I typically encounter. I'll just be like with my patients, but of course that I'm like talking about also ourselves, right? So I think it would be, I don't know what the statistics are, but I envision that we're not always like married to or raising people that are the same dosha types that we are. So like, how do all the doshas get along when you're talking about like, hey, I need to make this for me, or this is going to be right for me. And I assume if we're experiencing a seasonality there is some commonality to the season, but what are some of your tips for those that are wanting to both nurture themselves and their dosha, but also need to be taking care of others?
So the most important thing I will say is that in the morning, our first meal, literally, Ayurveda really talks about is having more of a warm meal in the morning. To kickstart our day with a warm meal in the morning, not skipping our meals. It may be something as simple as maybe, a whole wheat toast. Or it can be something as simple as, let's say you're making some sort of an omelette for yourself. But again, something warm in the morning to consume. And then one of the things that Ayurveda really emphasizes is, our biggest meal of the day literally should be lunch. So that's one of the things that we definitely will emphasize also, is our bigger meal of the day should be lunch. Because that's what Ayurveda talks about, that our pitta becomes more prominent. Pitta being what we call the element that is responsible for digestion, metabolism, assimilation in the body. So what we call the fire, the Agni in the body. So that is most active between 12 to 1. And that's why our bigger meal of the day literally should be our lunch. And as we unwind throughout the day, our lighter meal of the day should be our dinner. So even if we follow a simple thing as having more of a moderate breakfast, a larger meal at lunch, and more of a lighter meal at dinner, because our digestion also is slower in the evening, our metabolism is slower in the evening. So that also actually can help a lot of patients, especially with any let's say digestion issues, GI issues, and things as well.
And so if our partner, let's say our husband or our wife, has a different dosha type, but you focus on the amount and sort of the heaviness, if you will, the fullness and the lightness of the meal, that's one way that we can collaborate and sort of be in a shared experience on that part. Okay, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Okay, so we did have a question come in where somebody is asking about okay, so she's asking about dairy. So where does dairy stand in the Ayurveda conversation?
So dairy actually in Ayurveda, so when it comes to milk, it comes to ghee, which is the clarified butter as well, yogurt as well. This is something that Ayurveda talks about definitely to be included in our diet. And these are something that Ayurveda talks about having what we call the madhur ras, which is the sweetness. The sweetness in Ayurveda also means nourishing for the body. So Ayurveda definitely recommends having dairy, milk, especially ghee, because ghee is considered more like of a brain tonic as well. So something that actually helps increase the appetite. So ghee is something, or dairy is something that's already included, and then something that I would definitely emphasize on having on a daily diet, actually.
Yeah, and she's saying that ghee works very well, but she doesn't tolerate other dairy. And I think what you're saying is, like, enjoy the ghee. Then it's not that you have to have something if you don't tolerate it. Okay,
absolutely.
And I think we can offer up to that too, that it's really hard to be broad about dairy because how dairy is produced is so distinct, and different sources. You might do okay with goat versus, and sheep versus cow or that piece. Wonderful. Okay, and then I had one other question. So on the spice front, are there better spices? And I think what they're meaning is fresh, frozen, dried. So you were talking a bit about the turmeric. I'm thinking, yes, okay, so that's it. So is it okay to use dried spices? Do you need to use fresh herbs and spices? Can you freeze them? So tell us a little bit about that part.
Sure. So when it comes to, let's take an example for ginger. Okay, ginger is better using fresh. You also get a dried version of ginger. So for people who cannot tolerate fresh ginger, a lot of times you get the dried powder of ginger as well. That can be actually used as well. Similarly for turmeric, the turmeric tubers actually are dried in the sun. So they soak up the energy of the sun, and that actually helps with increasing the potency of turmeric. So your dried turmeric could have a better potency than you also get your fresh turmeric as well. So it depends upon what is available at that point of time. Again, dry spices have a longer shelf life comparatively, so it could be used longer or better. But again, whatever's available fresh is always better.
And I'm just curious, I get asked a lot of questions, or I get asked the question pretty frequently about sweeteners. So what do we use for things to be sweet? So talk a little bit about sweet as it relates to Ayurveda, maybe what it means, and then also what are some of the better ways to satisfy those sweet cravings?
Okay, so through Ayurveda, and I think about Ayurveda, Ayurveda actually emphasizes a lot on use of honey, actually, and your raw, unprocessed, local honey. Actually, a lot of times can be used in Ayurveda. And one other thing what Ayurveda really emphasizes is honey should not be cooked, because once you cook the honey, it actually loses potency. So as long as, let's say, you're making a tea, as long as it's more like warm temperature or room temperature, it's okay to add the honey, but you wouldn't add the honey in something which is like you're boiling that tea. So I would rather keep that tea to be more on the warmer side and then add the honey. So that's what Ayurveda talks about, is we shouldn't really cook the honey. So the sweetness part, the Ayurveda part, when I think about is adding more of honey or some of the fruits that are available in the season. And again, to satisfy your sweet tooth, again, your fruits are one of the best examples. Again, fresh is better. What is available in the season is always better.
And is there anything that works to cut a sweet craving? So if you're saying to yourself, I know I'm just craving it, and I think fruit, or I love those recommendations. Is there anything that sort of balances you out of the sweet craving, even though noting that sometimes the craving is up in our head? Yeah. So
making sure that our meals are balanced a lot of times. One of the things I find, especially in patients, if they are going lower in the carbohydrate intake, a lot of times more of the complex carbohydrate intake, that's where a lot of times I see a lot of the sugar craving coming in. So as long as we're including those whole grains, including those lentils, those beans, those fruits, those vegetables, having a more balanced approach in our meals, I see a lot of times the sugar cravings going down.
So that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I think that's it. A lot of us have said, like, well, we want to, we're going to go lower in carbohydrate, but then it's a lot of stevia, or it's a lot of, a lot of the sweetness on that part. Well, Gauri, this is fantastic. I hope you guys feel as I do. Whenever you're watching it again, you might be joining us on YouTube whenever you find this. If you did love and learn about Ayurveda, we'd love for you to give us a thumbs up. And I just really encourage you to check out ayurnutrition.com. As I mentioned earlier, there is a book that she has. It's available wherever books, Amazon, etc. The primer on Ayurveda, but also this wonderful opportunity to connect directly with Gauri for a 15-minute clarity call. So I hope that you'll take us up on that part so that you can talk to her specifically now that you kind of have the foundation of how Ayur Nutrition comes together. So Gauri, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Ashley, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely.